couple of seconds of suspense before it starts really recording. There we go. I think you're ready. Ready to go.
Cool. Okay. Thank you, Gabby and Chris, for inviting me along to this, and hi everyone. So I'm Leonard Carey. I'm the founder of Aware Technologies. Our brand is Aware Tag, and I'm going to make a confession now. I'm not going to talk about our product in any real detail. Also, I'm a bit of a geek as well, so if there's lots of comments down the side about he's just going off on one, just please say. But what I do want to talk about is the project that we're doing with Leeds Council, with some charities, with tenants, more importantly, around how are we going to tackle a big problem that I think we all come across and we've seen lots of news around, which is in housing, which is in social housing, mold and damp, and the impact that it's having on tenants, their well-being, the state of their home, their life chances, but also the impact that's having on landlords who, I'm going to dispel a few myths, I guess, but we're trying to tread a path that considers both groups, if you like, tenants and landlords. Because what we've realised is that everybody who's trying to solve this big problem is a good-hearted person. There's nobody who wakes up every morning and says, I'm going to make somebody's life difficult. But I think one thing that we started with in this project was, I've been in the IoT, machine-to-machine telemetry industry for a long time. I know I look super young and everything, and so put some comments down there, please. The one thing that we said at the beginning of this project was, IoT, and it's a bit of a bold statement really, IoT will not work in people's homes unless people trust it and have data agency over the data that's generated. And we said this a few years ago, and we built the business around this principle around data ethics, data agency, and data currency. You can call it many different labels, but we started off on that journey, and we deliberately said, well, let's play with the idea of let's pretend there's no such thing as the cloud. Let's pretend that it doesn't exist. There's some sort of zombie apocalypse and the cloud doesn't exist, but you still want to get information at the edge. You still want to understand exactly what's going on in your home, but without having to share and having to be forced to share information with the council or a landlord. Let's start with that sort of edge hypothesis. And the great thing is, we won this project as a GovTech funded project because we kind of stuck to those principles of we're going to do something where we are going to have the tenant at the center of everything, of all the design principles right from the very beginning. And at the time, even then, when we won the funding, that was back in, I think it was the end of 2019. There weren't that many people talking around it. But what we've now discovered is that ethics and IoT isn't just about the technology. It is about understanding things like stigma. It is understanding things that it's a home rather than just a house that we're talking about. It is also it is about expectations, because we've got sensors and crazy mathematics that can do 3D modeling and psychometric charting and all this great things. But at the heart of it, you've got to try and get somebody to get the services that they need at the right time, at the right in the right places. But also, you've got to try and help them to help themselves as well, because what we've discovered with all the research that we've been doing is that most tenants want to help themselves. And if you turn it back on us all on this call, it's all about stigma, I think, and removing the stigma attached to being a council tenant. because any one of us through any change of circumstances could need a council home or social housing home, but we'll still remain quite proud about our own home and how we see that home, and we don't always want to have sensors in that home, and you've got no control over that and where that information is going. And you may not always want a letter or somebody knocking on the door and saying, open your window, do this, do that. People have autonomy and people want to create homes rather than houses. And I think the really strong thing that we've discovered is that of all ages and of all digital inclusion levels, and some of you may come across, there's this brilliant, I think GDS, or a digital inclusion scale, I think it's 1 to 7. And by the way, I've got to do a bit of a shout out to GDS, Government Digital Services, and Leeds Council, but I don't know if every of you have ever done an alpha assessment with Government Digital Services, but there's about 14 different criteria, and that you've got to pass at halfway point within the project. And a lot of those are around user-centered or people-centered design. And what I'm really surprised about is that everybody in those assessment groups, they love the idea of being user-centered, of privacy by design, and people are quite passionate about it. But the hard thing to do, which we've been trying to tackle, is how do you implement it? And that's the really, really hard thing to do, because it's hard to just take away this idea that's all about the technology. And we were quite disciplined, and we took some guidance from GDS, and still are now, and with Leeds, to look at, let's not start the whole project with technology. Let's start the project with 6 months worth of really understanding people, really understanding people's motivations, understanding where they have they put their trust. We had this great quote from we're working with one of the charities. They talked about who is the trusted messenger. You think, oh wow, what does that mean? But they said, well, you can have all this great data. So they're an energy advice charity. So you can have all this great data, but then if you present that information to a tenant, you say, hi, I'm Len, you need to open your window or put your heating up, they'll probably go, who's this guy? If the council were to do that, then people may think, well, I'm not quite sure what they're trying to tell me, do I really trust them? But if an energy advisor said it, or another charity or next door neighbour said something, and they could relate to that information, they could understand the AI that we're building, it was explainable. I think a lot of you have come across explainable AI and and relatable AI. But it's more than making sure your code is well documented. It is about finding ways so that people can understand how that information, how those results relate to them personally, relate to their lifestyle, relate to their house, and that they can then be confident that they can make the changes that are then being suggested. By the way, I'm trying not to make this a bit of a lecture, so please. But I think it's a bit of a revelation for us, really, because we started off with, like I say, this view of let's have privacy at the heart, but we were techies at heart, really, and you do fall into saying, well, look at this wonderful graph, isn't it fantastic? But people don't like graphs, people don't understand graphs. Not everybody, some people do. Some people understand percentages. So they had to find new ways of even communicating information that a lot of us take for granted every day. And there's one particular thing that we did for it took 3 months to find a method where we could communicate how a house is performing and how an individual's activity was impacting the house. And just graphically displaying that took us 3 months. And we tried graphs, we tried bar charts, we tried everything. And then we just came across something that we got from gamification. And that was great, because suddenly we weren't talking about, haven't we got a great sensor? We were talking about, we've got some really good information for you as a tenant that's going to help you get the best out of your home, and you're going to be able to relate to it in a way that you haven't been able to have done in the past. But on the other side as well, for the landlords, for the council, it's the same thing, because now go back to this whole thing of trust. I'll go back a bit. The whole topic about mold and damp, I think we've all seen it in the news. I think there's an ITV journalist doing an awful lot of work on it. And I don't know if I get too passionate about these things, but we need to actually talk to the people, the repairs teams, the disrepairs teams, the help desks. None of them want to have any of their tenants in a mold and damp place. But all of them are struggling with, how am I going to interpret, because they know that there's IoT out there, but they're struggling with, how am I going to interpret that data in such a way that I can really help that tenant in that circumstances, in that house, do the right thing in a way that is free of stigmatization, in a way that is not patronizing, in a way that actually they can learn something and I can learn something as well. And so it is this bit about, how do we, that service consideration. Everybody that we've spoken to, and from different housing associations as well, they want to do the right thing and they want to adapt their services, but they want to know that, can I trust in this data? Is it going to make a difference? Is it scalable? I'll give you a stat, and some of you may know this, but I'm not going to say which one, but some housing associations that we've spoken to, they've got one surveyor that needs to, is responsible for 3,000 homes. Now they've got to deal with those stock condition surveys, the repairs requests, everything that goes, is thrown at them every single day, 3,000 homes. Now, on average though, that's about, I think it's about 12 homes a day, I think it is, or maybe a bit more. But they can only really look at 4. But these guys really want to do a good job. So going back to the title, I guess, of this around IoT ethics and service consideration, we've had to try and balance quite a difficult thing to try and solve a big problem. The balance is, how do you get just enough data from a service point of view to be able to affect the change that you really need to affect in the right time in the right place? But how do you do it in such a way that tenants actually want it, that don't see it as being spooky, that don't see it as being intrusive, don't see it as being spying? And the really good testament to this is, some of you may be familiar with the ICO legal basis for collecting and processing data. There's about 6, I think. The top one is consent, well, depending on how you Google it, but there's consent, and then there's public task and some others. One really good thing that Leeds did at the very beginning of the project, we said to them, look, we want to put these sensors in by consent. Tenants have to consent to it. And it has to be ongoing consent. We don't want to rely on public task, even though there's lots of legislation around fitness for habitation and NEES and HHSRS and all these different things. You can imagine as a landlord saying, look, I'm getting all this legal, all these obligations where I'm being told I need now to make sure people are warm, free of damp, can afford heating. So hell yeah, I'm putting these tags in, and I'm going to make sure every home's got to have it in there. But we said, well, let's try and experiment. Let's find a way of helping tenants understand the value of this for them as well as you, and let's go to consent. Let's use consent rather than a public task. And I went for it.
Sorry to cut you off. Just got a couple of minutes, maybe a minute left. So
you know what? I'm probably going to end on that anyway. But
okay,
I think you know, I think for this, we're a bit unconventional, a bit disruptive, because I think we started from the standpoint of, what if this was me? What if I was a tenant? What if I was having to be told there's some IoT, there's some sensors, and you've got no idea what they were and where they're going? What if that was happening to me tomorrow? And how would I feel? And I think that's a really, really important heart to everything that we've been doing. And thankfully, you know, we've built the technology, and what we've understood is that in order to be able to have this idea of ethics and IoT and the service part that goes with it, you know, we've had to design edge computing, edge processing, edge electronics, cloud, but not quite cloud, and distributed AI as well. We had to do an awful lot of things just to make sure we can address that central tenant, which is the person. So I'm gonna end it there. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Thanks, Leonard. I'm just going to stop the recording now, and then we've got a couple of questions, I think, to